September 20th, 1945. 4 months after Nazi Germany surrenders, a U.S. military aircraft lands at a secret airfield outside Washington, D.C. A man steps off the plane, middle-aged, slight build, wire-rimmed glasses. He looks like an accountant, a professor, someone harmless. He's neither. He's Major General Reinhard Gehlen, head of military intelligence for the Nazi Wehrmacht Eastern Front, the man who ran Germany's spy networks against the Soviet Union. He's a Nazi general, and the United States just flew him to Washington, secretly, to offer him a job. Not a trial, not a prison cell, a job. The Cold War is beginning. The Soviets are the new enemy, and America needs intelligence on Soviet forces, troop movements, military capabilities, strategic intentions. Gehlen has that intelligence, years of it, files, microfilm, networks of agents, still operating behind Soviet lines. He buried it all before Germany surrendered, in metal drums, in the Bavarian Alps. The deal is simple. America gets the intelligence, Gehlen gets immunity and money, and the freedom to rebuild his spy network under American protection. For the next 11 years, Reinhard Gehlen will run a private intelligence service, funded by the CIA, staffed by former Wehrmacht officers, former SS officers, men who served Hitler, now serving America. In 1956, he'll become the first chief of West Germany's Federal Intelligence Service, the BND, a position he'll hold until 1968. Nazi war criminal? No charges filed, no trial, no prison. He retires with honors, lives comfortably in Bavaria, dies in 1979, age 76. Your neighbor could have been a Nazi spy, living in plain sight, protected by the very government that defeated Hitler. This is the story of Reinhard Gehlen, the Nazi who became America's top intelligence asset, the man who proved that in the Cold War, moral lines disappeared and former enemies became essential allies. Because when the Soviets became the threat, Hitler's spies became America's spies. And nobody stopped it. Reinhard Gehlen, born 1,902 inches, Erfurt, Germany. Career military officer, joins the Reichswehr in 1920, rises through the ranks. Not a frontline commander, a staff officer. Intelligence, analysis, planning. By 1942, he's a colonel, head of Foreign Armies East, Fremde Heere Ost, the Wehrmacht intelligence division responsible for the Soviet Union. His job is to track Soviet forces, predict their movements, assess their capabilities. He's good at it, methodical, precise, builds extensive networks of agents behind Soviet lines, spies, informants, defectors. His reports go directly to Hitler's high command, but Gehlen sees what's coming. By 1944, Germany is losing. The Eastern Front is collapsing. Soviet forces are pushing west. The Third Reich has months left, maybe a year. Gehlen starts planning, not for victory, for survival. He knows the Nazis will lose. He knows there will be trials, executions. He needs leverage, insurance, something valuable enough to trade. So he starts copying everything. Every intelligence file, every agent report, every assessment of Soviet military capabilities. He microfilms it all. 50 steel drums full of documents. Spring 1945. Germany is collapsing. Soviet forces are approaching Berlin. Gehlen's staff loads the drums onto trucks. They drive south, into the Bavarian Alps. They bury the drums in remote mountain locations. Mark the coordinates carefully. May 8th, 1945. Germany surrenders. Gehlen immediately surrenders to American forces, not the British, not the Soviets, The Americans. He tells them he has intelligence, critical intelligence, on Soviet forces, Soviet intentions, Soviet capabilities, information the Americans desperately need. The Americans are skeptical. He's a Nazi general. Why should they trust him? Why should they deal with him? Gehlen plays his card. He tells them about the drums. 50 drums of Soviet intelligence, buried in the Alps. Detailed assessments of Soviet military strength. Agent networks still operational behind Soviet lines. The Americans want it. All of it. But there's a problem. Gehlen isn't just offering information. He's offering a deal. He wants immunity. He wants his staff protected. He wants funding to rebuild his network. He wants to continue operating as an American asset. The decision goes up the chain, to Army intelligence, to the OSS, the precursor to the CIA, all the way to the top. The verdict? Accept the deal. September 1945. Reinhard Gehlen is flown to Washington, Fort Hunt, Virginia, a secret interrogation facility. He's debriefed extensively for months. And then the Americans make him an offer he can't refuse, because they need what he has. And he needs what they can provide: protection, funding, legitimacy. The Nazi becomes a U.S. intelligence asset, and the moral lines of World War II blur into the gray fog of the Cold War. 1946. Gehlen returns to Germany, not as a prisoner, as an American employee. He's given a budget, resources, permission to rebuild his intelligence network. He calls it the Gehlen Organization, based in Pullach, a suburb of Munich. Officially, it doesn't exist. Unofficially, it's one of the most important intelligence services in the Cold War. Gehlen starts recruiting. But not just anyone. He wants his old team back. Wehrmacht intelligence officers, men who served under him during the war, men who know Soviet intelligence, who ran agents in the East. Some of them are former SS, some worked in concentration camps, some have war crimes allegations. It doesn't matter. Gehlen needs expertise. America needs intelligence. Moral considerations are secondary. The CIA provides funding, millions of dollars. The Gehlen Organization grows. By 1949, it employs over 4,000 people, analysts, case officers, agents, operating across Europe. Their mission? Spy on the Soviets. Everything. Troop deployments in East Germany, political developments in Moscow, nuclear weapons programs. Anything that gives America an edge. And the intelligence flows. Gehlen's network provides reports, assessments, raw data. The CIA estimates that 70% of American intelligence on Soviet forces comes from the Gehlen Organization. 70%. From a Nazi general's private spy service. But there's a problem. A catastrophic problem. The Soviets know about Gehlen. They know who he is, what he's doing, where he operates, and they infiltrate him completely. Soviet intelligence plants moles inside the Gehlen Organization. Deep cover agents, feeding disinformation, compromising operations, reporting back to Moscow. Gehlen doesn't realize it, or maybe he does and can't admit it, because admitting Soviet penetration means admitting failure, and failure means losing American funding. So the intelligence keeps flowing, but how much is real? How much is Soviet deception? Nobody knows, not even the CIA. 1,950 seconds. The Gehlen Organization becomes a disaster. Operations fail. Agents disappear. Networks collapse. The Soviets are always one step ahead, because they're reading Gehlen's mail. Literally, his organization is compromised at every level, but America keeps funding him, because the alternative is worse. No intelligence at all. 1956. West Germany regains sovereignty, creates its own intelligence service. The Bundesnachrichtendienst, BND, Federal Intelligence Service. Reinhard Gehlen becomes its first president, the Nazi general, now the official intelligence chief of democratic West Germany. Think about that. A man who served Hitler, who ran intelligence operations for the Wehrmacht, is now running intelligence for America's closest European ally. He holds the position until 1968, 12 years, overseeing West German intelligence, reporting to Bonn and Washington. During his tenure, the BND is repeatedly compromised, Soviet moles everywhere, operations blown, agents captured, defectors turn out to be double agents. It's a disaster. But Gehlen remains untouchable, protected by the CIA, by West German politicians who owe their careers to American support, by the Cold War imperative that intelligence, even bad intelligence, is better than no intelligence. 1968. Gehlen finally retires. Age 66. He's given honors, pensions, praise for his service. He moves to a comfortable house in Bavaria, writes his memoirs, justifies his choices, claims he was always loyal to Germany, that working for America was pragmatic, that the Cold War demanded compromises. He never faces trial, never answers for employing war criminals, for compromising Western intelligence, for the catastrophic failures of his organization. He dies June 8th, 1979, age 76, in his bed, surrounded by family, no charges, no accountability, just a comfortable retirement, funded by the same governments that prosecuted Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg. The man who served Hitler died peacefully, protected by America, honored by West Germany, living proof that in the Cold War, moral clarity was the first casualty. The Gehlen Organization employed war criminals, not accidentally, systematically. Klaus Barbie, the Butcher of Lyon, responsible for thousands of deaths, torture, deportations to death camps, employed by Gehlen, protected by the CIA. Alois Brunner, Adolf Eichmann's right-hand man, organized deportations of Jews to Auschwitz, worked for Gehlen, escaped to Syria, lived there until 2010. Franz Six, SS officer, commanded Einsatzgruppen death squads, convicted at Nuremberg, served 4 years, released, employed by Gehlen. These weren't isolated cases. The Gehlen Organization was filled with former Nazis, because Gehlen wanted men who knew Soviet intelligence, who spoke Russian, who had experience, and the CIA allowed it, funded it, looked the other way. Why? Because the Cold War demanded it. The Soviets were the new enemy. Yesterday's Nazis were today's allies. Moral considerations were luxuries America couldn't afford. But the cost was real and catastrophic. The Soviet penetration of Gehlen's network compromised Western intelligence for decades. Operations failed. Agents were captured, executed, entire networks rolled up. The Soviets fed disinformation through Gehlen's moles, false intelligence designed to mislead, to waste resources, to create paranoia. American intelligence was poisoned by the very organization it funded, by the Nazi general it protected. And Gehlen, he knew, he had to know. The failures were too consistent, the blown operations too frequent, the pattern too obvious. But admitting Soviet penetration meant admitting failure, and failure meant losing American funding, losing legitimacy, facing accountability. So he kept quiet, kept reporting, kept collecting his paycheck. The CIA suspected. Of course they did. But acknowledging the problem meant acknowledging they'd made a catastrophic mistake, that they'd empowered a Nazi, that they'd compromised American intelligence. So they kept funding him, kept protecting him, kept using his intelligence, even when they knew it was compromised. It's the bureaucratic trap, the sunk cost fallacy. We've invested too much to admit it was a mistake, so we keep investing, keep hoping, keep pretending, until 1968, when Gehlen finally retires, and West Germany starts cleaning house, slowly, quietly, replacing his people, building new networks, admitting, without saying it explicitly, that the Gehlen era was a disaster. But by then, the damage is done. Decades of compromised intelligence, billions of wasted dollars, hundreds of dead agents, and Reinhard Gehlen, he retires comfortably, writes his memoirs, justifies everything, dies peacefully in 1979, the Nazi who became a spy, who built an empire, who compromised Western intelligence, who lived in plain sight, protected, funded, honored, all because in the Cold War, yesterday's enemy became today's asset, and moral clarity became a casualty. Today, intelligence agencies face the same question. Do you work with morally compromised sources? Do you employ people with dark pasts? Do you make deals with yesterday's enemies? The answer is yes, because intelligence is about information, not morality, about advantage, not justice, about winning, not being right. Gehlen proved that lesson, for better or worse. His organization failed, catastrophically, but the precedent survived. The CIA still works with questionable allies, still makes uncomfortable deals, still prioritizes intelligence over ethics, because the alternative is being blind. And in geopolitics, blindness is fatal. Gehlen's story is uncomfortable. A Nazi general protected by America, employed by the CIA, running West German intelligence, dying peacefully at 76, no trial, no prison, no accountability, just a comfortable retirement. It's the dark bargain of intelligence work, the moral compromise at the heart of espionage. You work with bad people to stop worse people. You make deals with devils to fight demons. Reinhard Gehlen lived in plain sight, in Bavaria, in West Germany, protected by the Americans who defeated his former master, employed by the democracy built on Nazi ruins. Your neighbor could have been him, the quiet man with glasses, the retired civil servant, the grandfather with a dark past, hidden in plain sight, protected by governments, living proof that in the Cold War, yesterday's Nazi became today's spy, and nobody stopped him, because in the end, the Cold War wasn't about justice. It was about winning. And Reinhard Gehlen? He won.